Hello, my name's Marjorie, and I just found out something from my husband's boss that, honestly, I still can't believe. Turns out, while I was keeping our house together, he was secretly funding another woman's life and hiding it behind business deals and fake documents. That wasn't even the worst part. He looked me in the eye and handed me a revised prenup, like I was just another asset to manage. But what really broke me? Realizing my daughter knew Clara's name, and I didn't. So now I'm asking, how long had I been married to a stranger? And what else has he kept buried? I stood just outside the ballroom, heels already pinching, heart 2 steps behind my smile. The gala was grand. Those ridiculous chandeliers dripping in crystal, every laugh just a little too loud, every glass of wine poured just a little too full. Gordon disappeared within 5 minutes, off to shake hands, talk numbers, flatter the board. I clung to the edge of the room like an outsider at her own life. Women my age talked about ski homes in Aspen, their grown sons at Duke, weekend trips to Napa. I smiled when spoken to, but none of it touched me. Then I saw Lowell Avery, Gordon's boss. We'd exchanged pleasant words over the years, but nothing more. Tonight, though, he approached me directly. "Marjorie," he said, "do you mind stepping outside for a moment?" I hesitated, blinking. "Is something wrong?" His eyes flicked toward the crowded room. "It's about Gordon. I think it's time you knew something." We slipped down a quiet corridor, away from the noise. He opened a side door to a small lounge. Dim lighting, leather chairs, the kind of place where secrets were built to survive. He waited until I sat before lowering his voice. "I know this is not how we usually talk, but Gordon's been sending money, regularly, to someone named Clara Burney." The air in the room shifted. Lowell continued gently. "I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't sure. I've seen the transfers myself. I thought you should hear it from someone who didn't want anything from you." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stared at him, as if by looking hard enough I could rewind time and choose not to come to this gala. "Thank you," I said finally, standing too quickly. "I should get back." The ride home was quiet. Gordon drove with his usual calm, oblivious. Not once did he ask where I'd been, why I was so still. That used to be a comfort, his silence. Now it stung. By the time we got home, he'd peeled off his jacket and slipped into his office for one last email like always. I sat on the couch, staring into the dark. At some point, I drifted off, clutching a blanket I didn't remember pulling over myself. Morning came fast. Gordon was already out on the patio, coffee in hand, scrolling his phone. I slipped into his office, my fingers shaky but deliberate. In the back drawer behind some old tax files, I found it. A small business card, thick stock, expensive print. Rogers and Blackwell, LLP, Estate Defense, Marital Asset Strategy. There was a date written on the back. 2 years ago, 2 years. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the truth unfurl, quiet and cruel. I closed the drawer, walked down the hallway. My reflection in the mirror stopped me. Same silver strands, same face I'd worn for decades. But something had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, I wondered what else had. That night, sleep never found me. I lay in bed beside Gordon, listening to his even breathing while my mind unraveled in silence. The card still burned in my pocket, a silent weight pressing down on everything I thought I knew. By dawn, I was already awake. He lingered in the shower, steam hissing from behind the closed door while I crept back into his office. My hands moved with quiet urgency. I knew where he kept the spare key, tucked behind an old frame certificate. I unlocked the bottom drawer and pulled out a worn folder marked in bold, Legacy Holdings. Inside were pages of financial records, some joint, most not. One printout caught my eye. Sleek paper, watermark faint under the morning light. A private account, not our shared bank, not one I'd ever seen. Line after line. Each month, $2,500 wired to the same name, Clara Burney. My fingers stiffened. 16 months. 16 deposits, all directed to a routing number based in Nashville. That wasn't a fluke. That wasn't business. That was deliberate. I told myself it could be anything. A loan, a forgotten favor. "Maybe she's in trouble," I whispered. But if that were true, Why had Gordon never said a word? Why the secrecy? My eyes traced the numbers again and again, hoping they'd rearrange into something less personal, less intimate. But they didn't. He'd been building something behind my back, quietly, carefully, without me. And I'd been setting the dinner table, folding his shirts, laughing at jokes at parties, like some fool who didn't notice the walls shifting around her. I stood frozen for minutes before I tucked the folder back, relocked the drawer, and walked out. In the kitchen, Gordon poured himself a second cup of coffee. The scent of dark roast filled the air as he looked over at me and said, "Morning." I stared at him. "Morning," I echoed, sliding the newspaper across the counter to cover the evidence still trembling in my hand. He didn't notice. He never did. He added cream, stirred, and opened his phone like it was any other day. Like I hadn't just found proof that our life wasn't shared, but sectioned off, me in one corner, Clara in another. I stood at the sink, my hands wet from rinsing a plate I didn't remember holding. Inside, I was cracking. Outside, I smiled. Later, I stood by the window, watching the sun stretch across the yard, where we used to have cookouts, plant tomatoes, argue about whether the dog should sleep inside. It looked the same, but it didn't feel like home anymore. He was calm, collected, while I was unraveling from the inside. If this was what marriage looked like after 40 years, why did it feel like I was the only one still showing up for it? I didn't plan on calling Sadie, but by mid-afternoon, the silence in the house had turned suffocating. I told myself it was just a check-in, a motherly call, nothing more. She picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" I hesitated. "Sweetheart, do you remember ever meeting someone named Clara with your father?" There was a pause. Not long, but long enough to tell me she was thinking harder than she expected. "Clara?" she echoed. "I think... Yeah, a long time ago. I was maybe 10. My hand gripped the edge of the counter. "Where?" "Nashville," she said. "Dad took me on a weekend trip. We stopped at this bookstore and a woman hugged him, real familiar. Called him, Gordo. I thought she was a co-worker or something. She gave me candy." I managed a small, steady voice. "You didn't think it was strange?" "I was 10, Mom. I thought everything was normal." After we hung up, I sat on the bed, still holding the phone like it might offer more answers. My reflection stared at me from the vanity mirror across the room. Same woman, different eyes. I had missed a piece of my own life. How many memories did he create without me? What stories did Sadie carry that I never got to hear? I opened my old journal, the one I hadn't touched since Sadie left for college. My pen hovered, then moved on its own. He built another life and brought her into it. By early evening, I had managed to breathe again. Barely. I set the journal down just as the front door opened. "Hey, Mom." Sadie's voice echoed through the foyer. I stepped into the hall, surprised to see her standing there with takeout bags. "I figured you hadn't eaten," she said. And I had this weird feeling. I hugged her tightly, longer than usual, then motioned toward the kitchen. While I unpacked containers, Sadie wandered toward Gordon's study. The door was cracked. He was on the phone. "She's digging," he said. "We need to get ahead of it before this spreads." Sadie froze. Her hand tightened around the doorknob, but she didn't push further. She backed away slowly and returned to the kitchen, her face pale. She didn't speak until we sat down. "Mom, why do I feel like you're not safe?" I met her eyes. What I saw in hers was the same tight dread that had been tightening in my chest for days. "Because maybe," I said softly, "I'm not." The morning after Sadie's visit, I woke earlier than usual. I moved through the kitchen quietly, setting the table like I always did. Eggs, toast, coffee. A performance I'd perfected over the years. But this time, I wasn't playing the part of the doting wife. I was setting a stage. Gordon came in, briefcase in one hand, jacket in the other. "Why did you take Sadie to see Clara?" I asked calmly, folding a napkin. He paused mid-step. "What?" "You heard me." He blinked, trying to recalibrate. "Where's this coming from?" "Nashville, the bookstore. Sadie remembers." His expression shifted. The mask slipped. "You've been talking to her about this?" His voice cracked, then sharpened. You had no business pulling her into this. She lived it, Gordon, I replied. She was there. I wasn't. He slammed his briefcase down on the counter, rattling a glass. You just can't let things go, can you? Always needing something to be wrong. Always digging. I'm not digging. I'm waking up. You're twisting everything. This is what you do. You build stories in your head. He pointed at me. And you make everyone pay for them. I stared back, unflinching. Maybe I'm finally done pretending I don't see what's in front of me. He stepped closer. You want to throw away decades over some old memory Sadie half remembers? Over some woman who doesn't matter? You introduced her to our daughter. He scoffed. It was harmless. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being honest. Something you've forgotten how to do. A mug shattered in the sink behind us. Sadie stood in the doorway, her hand still shaking from where she'd dropped it. You lied to me too? She asked, voice quiet but cutting. Gordon's mouth opened, but no words came. She turned away. He stood frozen. Then, muttering something I couldn't catch, stormed out of the kitchen and disappeared into his office. The door slammed. Sadie and I sat at the table in silence. He's not the man I grew up with, she whispered, staring at her untouched plate. No, I said, feeling the weight of my words. He's the man I stopped questioning. That's on me. Later that evening, I opened my journal again. I didn't write much, just one line. If I didn't ask now, there would be nothing left worth saving. Francine showed up just after 10 that morning, eyes wary, hands clenched around a folder she never intended to carry. I told myself to stay out of it, she said, but I can't anymore. She sat down at my kitchen table and slid the folder toward me. I opened it slowly. Inside was a printed copy of a staff newsletter, dated 3 years back. My eyes locked on one name that hadn't stopped haunting me. Clara Burney. Redacted, yes, but still there, still visible. Francine pointed to the paragraph. Clara was part of an internal audit. There were irregularities with corporate funds. She left right after that. The whole thing got buried. I scanned it again, and again. She didn't just leave, Marge. She was pushed out, Francine added, voice low. My friend in HR says Gordon signed off on the payouts that tied to her name. Quiet exit, full package. A chill ran down my arms. It wasn't just the affair, or whatever it was. He protected Clara and protected himself. She took the fall for him? I asked, my voice flat. Francine didn't answer. She didn't need to. After she left, I stared at the folder until noon. Then I slid it into my own drawer. No lock, no hiding. I wasn't the one burying the truth anymore. That night, Gordon came home early. No greeting. Just placed a manila envelope on the table while I reheated dinner. We should talk, he said. I didn't look at him. With everything going on, he continued, maybe it's smart if we separate our finances, just to keep things clean, in case people get ideas. I opened the envelope, a revised prenuptial agreement, his lawyer's name at the top, fresh date at the bottom. Is this a joke? I asked. He shifted like the ground had moved under him. It's just a precaution. You'd still be taken care of. I looked up slowly. You think this is about money? You think I'm going to protect you now? It's mutual, he said, suddenly defensive. It protects both of us. No, I said, sliding the papers back across the table. This isn't about protection. This is about control. He stared at me, speechless, and I stood. This isn't a marriage anymore, I said. It's a negotiation, and you already lost your leverage the second you tried to silence me. Later that night, I opened my journal again. The pen moved without hesitation. The moment he handed me that contract, he stopped being my husband. The next morning, I didn't wait for the house to fill with noise. While Gordon was still asleep, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to Francine's place. She looked surprised to see me so early, but she didn't ask questions. I need your help, I said. If there's something else, anything, we need to find it now. She led me into her dining room, where her laptop was already open. What exactly are we looking for? Property records, real estate in his name, or, in the company's name, anything out of place? Francine sighed, pulled her chair closer, and started typing. All right, let's see how clean his hands really are. It didn't take long. A house in Nashville, registered under a company subsidiary, small, obscure, but tied directly to Gordon's firm. A modest home, perfectly maintained, yet never occupied. No listed tenants, no mail forwarding. But the lease, signed by Clara Burney, and the mortgage, paid like clockwork by a holding entity partially owned by Gordon's company. Francine stared at the screen. Looks like a payout dressed as real estate. No, I said. It's a hiding place. She glanced at me, her voice low. You're not going to stay quiet anymore, are you? Not for a second. That evening I returned home before Gordon did. I printed everything. Ownership documents, payment history, Clara's lease signature. I placed them on his desk, neatly stacked, right next to the framed photo of our wedding day. I left a note on top. I know, and I'm not afraid of what comes next. I didn't wait for him in the kitchen. When he arrived, I heard the sound of his footsteps pause outside his office door. Silence followed, then the soft sound of paper being turned, one by one. I walked past the door without looking in. I went straight to the garden, where the roses needed trimming. I picked up my shears and got to work. The sun was beginning to set, but my hands were steady. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done waiting for him to tell the truth. I had already found it. The next morning the phone rang. I expected a telemarketer or Sadie checking in, but the voice on the line was unfamiliar, smooth, deliberate. You don't want to keep digging, Mrs. Harrow. It's not just your husband involved. Click. The line went dead. The envelope was thick. No return address, just my name typed in bold black on a white label. I found it in the mailbox the next afternoon, wedged between a real estate flyer and the electric bill. I knew it wasn't junk. I knew exactly what kind of message it was before I opened it. Inside, a single sheet, printed text, no signature, no warning tone, just a cold instruction. Stop. You don't know what you're walking into. Leave Clara out of it. I read it twice. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't scared, not exactly. But I felt something shift. This wasn't about Gordon anymore. This wasn't just personal. Someone else was watching. By sunset, I was standing inside Francine's cafe, behind the counter with her laptop open. The place was closed, chairs flipped onto tables, espresso machine already cleaned. She stared at the letter. Marge, this is serious. Whoever sent this, they don't just want you quiet, they expect it. I nodded. Then they don't know me. Francine hesitated, her voice soft. You need to back off. This isn't just about Gordon and some old affair. It's layered, legal, maybe criminal. I'm not backing off, I said. They're nervous. That means I'm close. Then I made a decision I hadn't dared say aloud until that moment. I'm going to see Clara. Francine looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Why would you go to her? Because she's not the enemy. She's another woman who was manipulated and buried, and if anyone knows the truth, it's her. The next morning, I drove to Nashville. Clara answered the door with hesitation, holding a mug in one hand, her eyes already tired. She didn't slam the door. She didn't call me crazy. She just said, I figured this day would come. We sat across from each other in her modest kitchen, a pot of tea growing cold between us. Your husband saved me once, she said after a long silence. I was going to lose everything. He stepped in, got the board to pay off the damages. Then he bought my silence, not with words, with this house, with quiet. You knew he was married. I did, she whispered. But I never thought he'd risk everything for me. And then I realized he wasn't. He was protecting himself. We weren't enemies. We were both discarded, both lied to. They're threatening me now, I told her. They're watching both of us. She nodded slowly, then walked to the hallway and returned with a small flash drive. I kept files, in case I ever needed protection. I took it. You're not the only one who needs it now. As I walked out, the air was thick with rain. And there it was, parked across the street, a black car, engine running, no plates, no movement inside. I didn't flinch. I tucked the flash drive into my purse and kept walking. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was war. I drove back through the night, rain turning to fog as I crossed the state line. The highway was quiet, almost eerily so. Just headlights and long stretches of silence. I didn't listen to music. I didn't call Sadie. I just drove, one hand gripping Clara's flash drive like it was a lifeline. Back home, the house was dark. Gordon hadn't returned. I went straight to my laptop, plugged the drive in, and waited. The files loaded slowly, as if the weight of their content made them resist being seen. Emails, wire transfers. One folder labeled CB Final. Another marked Internal Settlement Unofficial, but it was the file at the bottom that caught me. Privateagreement.pdf. I opened it, and there it was. Legal phrasing, buried clauses, a hush payment disguised as severance, Gordon's signature, Clara's, dates that matched everything. Morning came with no apology from the sky, just gray light bleeding through the windows. I set the kitchen table methodically. 2 plates, 2 mugs, toast and eggs. Not because I wanted breakfast, but because I needed a setting where I controlled every inch. Gordon walked in, loosened tie still dangling, eyes wary. "You're up early." I gestured to the table. "Sit." He obeyed, glancing at the neat arrangement like it was a trap. Maybe it was. "I met Clara," I said calmly. "I know about the house, the silent payments, the flash drive." His mouth twitched. "You don't," I cut in, raising my hand. "You don't get to act shocked. Not today." I placed the flash drive in the center of the table like a weapon. "This is everything you've built your world around, and it's the same thing that's about to unravel it." He stared at it, blinking too slowly. "You'd destroy me?" "No," I said, leaning back. "You already did that. I'm just done covering for it." He looked at me like he didn't recognize who I'd become. Good. I took off my wedding ring, set it next to the drive. This isn't revenge. This is clarity. I stood, walked to the hallway where my bag waited. "I'll be staying at Sadie's. I haven't decided what comes next." Gordon didn't move. Not when I grabbed my coat. Not when I opened the door. He just sat there, the flash drive and my ring staring back at him like a verdict. I woke up on Sadie's pull-out couch to the scent of cinnamon and coffee. Light slipped through the curtains in quiet streaks, warm but unfamiliar. For a split second, I reached for Gordon out of habit. Then I remembered. I didn't live there anymore, and I didn't want to. Sadie handed me a mug without saying a word. We sat across from each other in her small kitchen, the silence thick but not uncomfortable. For the first time in a long while, the quiet wasn't a threat. It was space. Space to breathe, to exist without shrinking. A few days passed. I cooked dinner with Sadie, watched her favorite shows, took walks just to move. I didn't tell her everything, not yet, but I didn't have to. She was watching me rebuild, piece by piece. Then the news came. It started as whispers, an internal review at Gordon's firm. Then a headline. Executive promotion halted amid ethics questions. The same flash drive I had left behind had apparently reached more than one inbox. Gordon tried to call, first once, then 3 times. I didn't pick up. Sadie did, her voice firm. "She's not interested in apologies that come too late. You had years. Now let her have space." He didn't call again. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in days. Clara. "I wanted to let you know," she said, her voice steadier. "I got hired. Small accounting firm. Nothing big, but honest work." "That's something," I replied. "And thank you for not making me feel like a scandal in someone else's mess." "You were never the mess," I said. "You were just caught in it." A few mornings later, I drove to the old house. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I stood by the rose bushes, the ones I planted 3 springs ago, and watched a bird pick at the mulch. That house still looked like home, but only from a distance. I didn't cry. I didn't knock. I just whispered, "I still believe in love." Just not in the version I was taught to endure. That night, I opened my journal one final time. Some wounds don't bleed. They echo, and I will carry that echo forward, not as pain, but as proof that I lived. In the end, it wasn't just about betrayal or silence. It was about waking up to the quiet ways we disappear inside relationships and choosing not to vanish anymore. If you're watching this and you've ever felt overlooked, manipulated, or made small in the name of keeping the peace, hear this from someone who's lived it. Peace without truth isn't peace at all. It's quiet suffering, and you deserve better. You deserve relationships that see you, that hold you, not control you. I hope my story reminds you to trust your instincts, to ask the hard questions, and to walk away if the answers break your soul more than staying ever could. And now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever reached that breaking point where silence cost you more than speaking up would have? Or maybe you've chosen yourself after years of forgetting who you were. Let's talk in the comments. Your story matters too. If this video touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't land for you, I'd love to know why. What would you have done differently in my shoes? And if you believe in stories that heal, challenge, and empower, subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next chapter. Thanks for listening, and wherever you are in your journey, keep going.